This is a video about fashion and the history thereof, or why I started getting into 1940s fashion and before. So I am your host, a 20-year-old fashion history enthusiast who, like most fashion history enthusiasts of my generation, have plagued TikTok with content about fashion history, vehemently defending it, you know. So yeah, this is me. I started vintage fashion when I was 15, so I've been doing it for about 5 years. I got into it through the 50s, as most people do, but I got into it through the music side first. So I started playing double bass about 15, 14. It was just before my 15th birthday. I really took it up, and I was obsessed with rockabilly, rock and roll, you know, blues, and even jazz to an extent. This is sort of before my 40s era though. So yeah, I was obsessed with Richie Valens, Dion and the Belmonts, Eddie Cochran, Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, the lot. I love them. I even went through a fucking Dion and the Belmonts phase, okay? And that is really how I got into fashion, because I saw the music, and I saw Dick Clark's American Bandstand, and I saw the audiences, and started delving into fashion plates and photographs, and I was like, I want to do that. And as somebody who didn't like modern fashions at the time, this is talking 2019, I was like, yeah, no, I'm going to do it. So I started my vintage wardrobe with a nice little Lindy Bop dress, had little ducks on it. It was sort of polyester, but we're not going to talk about that. Had little ducks on it, it was so cute. And that is like the birth of my vintage wardrobe. I was a really weird dresser anyway. Well, weird to modern standards. I was always wearing waistcoats, which is nothing wrong with that. I still do. But for a 14-year-old dressing in an environment where everybody was still in leggings, it was quite unusual, and people were like, what is that? So I could branch out a bit more, but I was still hindered by social expectations, because teenagers are fucking vile. Jokes. If there are any teenagers watching, I'm sorry, you're not vile. Unless you comment vile things, then I curse you. You know. But yeah, sort of starting vintage was overcoming the sort of social stigma of young people dressing like a grandma. Which, look at me, I'm dressed like a grandma. So I started expanding my wardrobe when I was about 16, 17. And that's when I started getting into 40s. I did the military history side of things in tandem with the 50s. So I was doing, like, to be honest, I was researching two different areas at two different points. The beginning of 2019, I was obsessed with the 50s. By the end of 2019, I was doing military history, First World War, genealogy. Well, to be fair, that's where my connection began, with a little chap who served in the Gloucestershire Regiment who was killed at the Somme. He was killed at Poitiers. And so I was obsessed very quickly with the 19-teens as well. And I started to see parallels in the fashion sense, you know, flared skirts, surprisingly, and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, I like it. And obviously, the older I got, the more I researched. I'm saying that as if it was like 20 years ago. But no, the more I researched, and then found myself with somebody who was a reenactor, and I started doing reenacting myself. And now I do mostly 40s, but I can also do Edwardian, which I love, 19-teens, 1930s and 1940s, 1950s, obviously. So yeah, the 40s side of it started coming about in late 2021. I got my first 40s wardrobe. 40s wardrobe, like a physical wardrobe is what I mean. Like an actual physical wardrobe from the 40s. My mum found it on Marketplace and was like, you can have it. I was like, oh, yay. And that was my sort of baseline for actually building a vintage wardrobe, because it was like, I've got a physical one, and then I've got all these modern shirts and Lindy Bop dresses in my wardrobe. I might as my actual wardrobe, so I might as well like make a vintage wardrobe. So that's what I did. And by 2021, I'd had a couple vintage dresses, a couple jackets. I started collecting hats, which was dangerous, because hats are really easy to buy and really easy to store because they're small. I've got about 40 hats now. Whoops. Yeah. So that was where it started, and it started growing and growing until I got this. I actually got this jacket last weekend at Wicksteed, so good fun. I'm going to go into sustainability, actually, of 40s fashion, well, not just 40s fashion, but any vintage fashion. So buying historical and vintage clothes that are actually from the period is a really good thing, because you're harnessing something that is 80 plus years old in my case. Even if you're getting something that's 20 years old, it's still recycling and reusing it and giving it a new lease of life. It's really a shame to see things thrown away, and especially when they're vintage. I hate to see like original clothes that have been destroyed because they've been left in a bag to be moth-eaten. So to rescue these garments and actually be able to wear them, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't wear them, you should put it in a museum. But the whole point is, if you put it in a museum, you're disconnecting the public with it. If you're actually getting somebody to wear it, or if you want to wear it yourself, you are connected to the garment, and you are thereby sharing it with the world, that you are also, you know, like, this is the thing, this is something I'm connected to, this is something that I love and is on me, and, you know, and people love that. The reason people love vintage fashion is because they can relate to it. They look at their own clothes and they're like, how were clothes different back then? A lot of people look at the things aesthetically. So they see, you know, curved hips and a sort of hourglass shape, and they think that's nice. But when you start doing vintage, you start actually looking for specific things. You look for structure of garments. Well, what garments are made out of. So this is worsted wool, and it's got a shitload of darts and pleats. Well, darts. The skirt's got pleats, but, you know, lace. How the lace has actually been put into a garment. How the buttons have been stitched on. How the buttonholes have been stitched. And then you realise that a lot of care and a lot of work has gone into each and every garment that is older than a certain age, or not bespoke. So that's part of it, like actually becoming connected to how the garment is created. And I think a lot of people do miss that out. A lot of people don't, in the sort of haste of living today. It's easy just to chuck a pair of jeans on and a t-shirt and just go. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, I do it sometimes, but it's also nice to be connected to garments. I literally, can I just say, totally historically accurate Pepsi. It's got me gassy right now, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's really important to wear these things, to be honest. I'm going to say that from the point of view of a history undergraduate as well. You know, I see my lecturers and they're like, oh, history's important, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, yes, it is, but there's something to be said about wearing clothes like this and walking to fucking Tesco and going, oh, you know, I'm going to buy my bread and milk for the day. And people look at you and they're like, wow, that's history. I am basically walking history, even though I have the mannerisms of a Gen Z. Mannerisms of speech, you know what I'm saying? But it's still helping the public to engage with it, which is something that's really difficult to do. And that's why social media is a perfect medium for it. I don't use Instagram because I fucking hate that app. It's a spawn of the devil app. But I do quite like TikTok, which, contrary to most people are like, oh, TikTok's the spawn of the devil app and Instagram's amazing. I find Instagram a little bit like, holy fuck, I'm ugly. Whereas TikTok, it's like, here are loads of other people who really like the things that you like, you know. And I don't feel so ugly. I mean, you can tell me I'm ugly all you want. I know. I have self-awareness. But it's not too bad. I prefer it because it helps people engage. And it's mostly a video format anyway, so people engage with it, pretty music and all that sort of thing. And you get a lot more people who actually like the stuff. So it's a really good format for education. Obviously, things can be misconstrued. Things can be discussed incorrectly. There are other forms of education. It's why I'm trying to steer away from being entirely educational at the moment and waiting till I get my degree to be able to say certain things. Because at the moment, yeah, while I'm studying, I actually am taking in knowledge. I don't feel like I'm qualified to just spit it out unless I'm talking about my own experiences with vintage fashion and why it's cool. So this is why this is a video about me, and by extension, you, the folks that want to dress vintage, why you should and all that sort of thing. I'm not rambling about Edwardian society because I'm not quite qualified yet. So yeah, that was a brief history of me, which I don't think the world really needed, but I feel like, you can have it. You can have a bit of me, you know. So that is why I do vintage fashion, briefly. I'm probably going to do another one of these in more detail about, oh, why do I do the military side of it, you know? And no, I'm not a Walt. I don't pretend to be. I don't pretend to be a subaltern in a women's service. I try and represent a woman. It's reenactment. It's really, you know, hard to explain. We are a different breed to a lot of people. I've become a reenactor. But yeah, I'll probably go into more detail about Edwardian fashion at some point. I don't know. I'll just see how this goes. If this fails, if this is a flop, I wasted an hour of my life trying to get snippets. This is completely unedited, so this is like one take, okay? This is one take. This is, I'm looking at my timing right now. 11 minutes of pure me talking. Well, I've been doing this for an hour because I've been doing takes and the cat's been meowing, or, you know, Florence here has fallen over, or some shit like that. I belched on camera. It happens, you know. This is just me, raw. Take it or leave it, you know. I'm not gonna be appealing to everyone. But yeah, this is a brief history of myself and my vintage fashion journey and the sustainability of vintage fashion. I hope you enjoy. You don't have to subscribe or anything like that, but it'd be nice if you did, because I'd actually love to make this a job. I'd love to make this a real thing, you know, sharing my love with the whole internet and actually making myself pretty damn vulnerable.